Welcome back to Tit Talk, Bosom Buddies. Today we are going to talk about how Dr. Harvey Karp continues the long-standing tradition of male pediatricians mansplaining motherhood to mothers. I don't know how else to put it. Okay, folks, welcome back to Tit Talk. Those who do not know their history are doomed to repeat it. And so today we're going to take a little walk down memory lane, talk a bit about history, talk a bit about current events, and then smash the patriarchy or something. The 1800s were garbage. The 1800s were garbage for a lot of reasons. I'm sure other centuries were also garbage. But the 1800s, particularly the late 1800s, were a sticky period of history because of the foundation that was set for us. Thanks, 1800s. A few interesting things happened in the 1800s that I'd like to point out. The first is that while germ theory had existed to some extent in parts of the world prior to the 1800s, it wasn't until the 1800s that Louis Pasteur came through and germ theory exploded. That will mean something in a moment. Another interesting thing that happened in the late 1800s is that there was a group of physicians attached to the American Medical Association who began to study illness in children, right? The pathology of the pediatric population. There were no pediatricians prior to like 1880, 1890. That was when this practice and this area of study and expertise and specialty, the germination, this is where it began, right? So we've got germ theory, right? Everyone is terrified of germs. Terrain theory is worth looking into if you haven't already, but germ theory has become popular. We now have a bunch of, old white dudes looking at illness in the pediatric population. And at the same time, we have the emergence of single-family homes where houses and dwellings were being created not with the village in mind, but with the nuclear family as the primary and sole habitant. Inhabitant? Whatever. So we've got germ theory, we've got pediatricians, and we've got single-family homes. Chelsea, what the hell does this have to do with anything in our lives today? It was no surprise that a bunch of dudes mansplaining motherhood and children to women didn't really go well initially. Most women and mothers at the time were like, okay, sure, that's cute. Thanks for letting me know your thoughts. I'm going to go ahead and just continue to be the OG pediatrician and authority on my baby because that is how it has always been, and we've done a pretty damn good job so far. It wasn't until around World War I, right, when the menfolk had been sent off to war and our economy was tanking because there was no one to do the jobs at home, right, on our soil. And women were pulled into the workplace to make up the space, to take up the job positions that the men who had left had left. So we now have pediatricians, germ theory, single-family dwellings, and women being pulled into the workplace. Not because they wanted to, bear with me, but because they were being compelled to, because it was the patriotic thing to do. It's what you did to support your country, right? Fine. So we now have women who, admittedly, when maternal instinct and divine femininity is taken and used primarily in religious aspects, it certainly becomes a tool of oppression and has and continues to all over the world and all throughout time. And yet we took what was inherently female, this ability to create offspring and keep offspring alive, and that became like a side gig. Not saying it shouldn't have. I have jobs. I have always had jobs. I don't think that this means that women need to never leave the house and be strapped to the stove all day long. But this was the beginnings, in my opinion, of the denigration and the dismantling of maternal instinct. And you have all of these convergences happening at once. We have now become terrified of germs. We now have old white dudes as the quote unquote authority of our babies and child development, which is bonkers. Because none of them, by the way, not any of those dudes, those old dude pediatricians, not any of them had ever raised a baby, had spent significant time with a baby, or did any actual scientific research on a baby. It was just their opinion. So it's all garbage. So we've got germ theory, we've got pediatricians, we've got these single family dwellings where we now no longer have the benefit of our female feminine village to support us. And now women are maybe against their will, but maybe because they wanted to, being pulled out of the home and put into the workplace. Obviously, women did not want to just go right back to the home after the men came back, because there is something beautiful about being able to do something for yourself in your life. And I happen to believe that fully. And still, what ended up being maybe the unintended consequence of all of this is that there was a systematic deconstruction of the energetic and mammalian connection that mothers have with their children. The power and the sovereignty and the freedom and the authority that women and mothers had over their children as the mama bears to their baby bears, right, was being bit by bit taken apart. Then we throw in geniuses like Dr. Emmett Holt, who wrote a book about the caring for and feeding of children, where, in the late 1800s, he recommended not holding them, not kissing them, making them sleep alone because they might get sick if they're with other people because of germ theory. Garbage human, Dr. Holt. And then we had Dr. Spock coming in the mid 1900s, saying the same kind of garbage about children being seen and not heard, and make sure that you withhold affection. And we started finding that women had no choice because they had been pulled out of the home or pushed out of the home, or whatever the answer, whatever it might be. They had no choice but to stop breastfeeding and start feeding their babies artificial infant milks. They had no choice but to sleep train their babies because they couldn't be up all night because they had to go to work in the morning. The entire purpose of how parenting, of the trajectory that parenting was pushed down in the late 1800s, the entire purpose was the economy. It had nothing to do with what was best for women. Trust me, I have worked crap jobs where I go and get paid minimum wage to do garbage, and I'm not happy, and I'm not fulfilled, and I'm not enjoying it. So it's not like these women were out pursuing their dreams. They were out doing menial labor. They were out doing the things that the men who went off to war were not there to do anymore, right? It wasn't because it was in the best interest of the women or, their dreams and hopes. It had nothing to do with what was best for the development of the child. It had everything to do with monnaies. It had everything to do with people making money off of us, the economy. It had everything to do with the bottom line of the 1%. Is anybody surprised? I don't think anybody should be surprised. So we have all of those things happening. And then we have the 40s and 50s where the nuclear family is ingrained. It is solidified. It is a mom, a dad, and the 2.5 kids and maybe a dog if they were fancy. That becomes the norm. And we have a completely disconnected, disjointed family unit. Kids are now being sent off to school. That also happened around this time, right? The industrial school to prison pipeline, that whole idea of creating good workers in this factory school setting kicked in right around this time as well. Excuse me. And so we have this insane convergence of attempts to disconnect maternal instinct. What this has to do with today. I would argue, having worked with however many thousands of families I've worked with, however many hundreds of moms I work with every year, if not maybe more than I can even remember at this point, there is an attempt, and it is a successful attempt many times, when a woman becomes pregnant, if they haven't already, because of the expectations of, maybe feminism, the expectations of our society, the expectations of our financial reality and our economy, if we haven't already broken her of her ability to hear her instinct, we're going to spend 9 months of this pregnancy doing everything we can to finish that job. Every time she comes in, we are not going to know her name. We're barely going to look at her. We're going to glance her up and down. We're going to only pay attention to the belly. We're going to accuse her of having a horrible diet and not taking care of herself and being a danger to her baby. Every appointment is going to be a hunt for pathology. Every appointment you have with your OB is going to be a hunt for a problem. That is how it's going to be. Hopefully, we will have destroyed her ability to hear her intuition or listen to her body or feel anything close to an authority on herself by the time she's ready to have this baby. And then we'll maybe push her into it before she's ready. We'll scare her into it before she's ready. We'll find a way to get her in for that 39-week induction. Thanks. But even if we don't, we will traumatize the hell out of her while she is in labor and during her birth. We will also traumatize the baby. So we will make sure everybody is in a state of trauma. And then we will send them home. We'll say, breastfeed your baby. And then we will send them home. And then things will fall apart because they always do. And then they will come back to us, the pediatricians now, and we will continue a hunt for pathology for the rest of that child's life. And pediatricians are now going to give you advice from the 1800s about how your baby should eat and how your baby should sleep and what we should expect from your baby. And this has not changed. It is 2023, and pediatricians, young pediatricians who just got out of medical school, are still giving the same advice that was given by those jackasses in the 1800s and the early 1900s. Not much has changed. We have research, we have data, we have evidence. We also, by the way, have an entire world full of humans who are not doing things the way we are doing and are actually healthier than us most of the time. You don't see school shootings all over the world. These kids are not all completely disjointed. You don't see the level of SIDS in other countries that you see here. We see a lot more breastfeeding around the world than we do in the developed world. In the US, in our country, in America, our maternal and infant mortality and morbidity rates, like moms and babies getting sick and dying or being permanently harmed during pregnancy and birth, our rates are the highest for that of any industrialized country in 2023. So clearly, we're not doing that great a job, but we continue on this path of disconnect. If a mother does not have a village, if a mother does not have the ability to hear her own intuition, because we've taken the village away, we have taken her ability to hear her own intuition away, we have now infused everything with the fear of these teeny tiny little germs, be that what it may, and we now have a woman who cannot parent, she cannot mother the way her ancestors mothered. She does not have the ancestral knowledge. She does not have a connection to her own intuition, her gut sense. And she passes off, because now she has to, or feels she has to, she will hand off her authority to the doctors, to the pediatricians, to whomever. And the point of all of this? Monies. The baby crap industry is a billions of dollars a year industry. There's a lot of money to be made off of insecure, terrified mothers at 2:30 in the morning when our baby isn't sleeping, the way the Instagrams say they're supposed to be sleeping, right? What does that have to do with us now? Well, let's talk about Dr. Harvey Karp. Dr. Harvey Karp, the infamous 5 S's. Is it 5 S's? I think I read the S's once and thought, well, this is garbage, because none of it actually worked and it didn't address the root cause. It was just more pediatrician trying to manage symptoms, in my genius opinion, before I even understood him. Turns out Dr. Harvey Karp has never had his own babies. He acquired a stepdaughter when she was like 7, but he's never had a baby. He's never lived with a baby. He's never raised a baby. He has no biological need or understanding of the biological need to sustain a baby because he's never had one. So this man who's never birthed, never had a menstrual cramp, can't possibly understand what it is to make a human and bring that human into the world, part of that patriarchal, we know best, comes in and mansplains to women. By the way, he took things that we already knew. The 5 S's, that was not his, he didn't come up with that. We already knew this. Women knew this. Mothers knew this, knew all these things. We knew all these things. But he patented it and made money off of it. He makes money off of mansplaining motherhood to mothers, right? In 2017, he decided to go a step farther down the crazy road, and he created a smart bassinet. I'm sure you've all heard of the Snoo. So this is essentially a box. It's a box where you swaddle your baby in an incredibly unnatural and anti-alignment way with their arms strapped down to their sides. And then you affix them literally to the mattress of the box. So they cannot move and they cannot roll over, right? I think the thinking is, well, if we just strap them in, can't roll over onto their stomachs. Fantastic. I guess that doesn't seem like a particularly genius mindset, but he made money, so I guess it makes sense. So this is a tool that will turn itself on when your baby starts to give early signs of feeding readiness, right? As soon as they start to wiggle or start to try to move, because remember, they're straitjacketed and it's tied to the literal mattress, it will turn itself on and it will start to sway. I think there's even a noise machine. It'll start to shh, right? So you should not attend to your baby, but the robot can. Okay, that's creepy on many levels. But this is essentially what this thing does, right? And people swear by it. Oh my God, my baby sleeps so great in there. No, they don't. If you don't understand what your baby is doing in that box, then please go to episode 2 of the Tit Talk Podcast. It is the one right before this. Have a listen, get an idea of what your sweet baby is actually doing. It doesn't make them sleep better. It doesn't teach them to sleep. You cannot teach someone to sleep. It is a physiologic process. Fetuses sleep. Who taught them, right? If a baby can't sleep, there's a reason for it, and it deserves a little bit more investigation, not just, the shutting down of reflexes and communication, which is all the Snoo does. It's all swaddles do. It's all the Snoo does. You shut them down so that they cannot communicate effectively, right? So the Snoo has been an issue for a while. I would argue that just about, every pediatric physical therapist, occupational therapist, chiropractor, osteopath, lactation consultant, decent pediatrician that I've met has been like, you shouldn't, they need to unwind. It's not great for the spine. It's not great for the arms. It's not great for the nervous system. It's terrible for feeding. It's not the wisest, nobody thinks it's a smart idea, except Carp, who's making all this money off of it, and the tired, stressed out, freaked out parents that he is making all his money off of, right? The ones who feel like they're at the end of their rope and don't know what else to do. He takes advantage of that fear and terror and unsupportedness and makes money off of it. He's the only person who's benefiting from this. So it turns out about a week ago, the Snoo got FDA approval as an infant sleep contraption, like a medical tool, which concerns me, and I think concerns a lot of people who work with new mothers and babies, not only because, it is $1,500. It's going to cost, that is what rent costs 10 years ago in Los Angeles for a 1-bedroom apartment. This is okay, great. So we're going to spend nearly $2,000 on a box robot that will parent your baby for you. Fantastic. Aside from it being financially untenable for most people, aside from that fact on its own should make you roll your eyes. And aside from the fact that it does all these maybe not great things to a baby's body that is supposed to be unwinding from the constraints. They're supposed to be in the process of trying to come out of that amphibian state in a water balloon and become a land mammal with lots of space and gravity. There is a process by which they need to unwind from that, right? Swaddling Babies don't like a swaddle. They don't want to be, it's not the confinement that they are seeking. It is that responsiveness. It's the never feeling hungry. It's the never feeling scared. It's the never feeling cold. It's the never being alone. That's what they want. It has nothing to do with the stupid piece of fabric, and certainly has nothing to do with the straitjacket that is strapped to the mattress in the Snoo. Okay? But there is this other insidious piece, and this is what I want you guys to just ruminate on, right? And what has everything to do with the history lesson at the beginning of this podcast. Babies sleep better for the first 6 to 12 weeks of their life than they do for the next 3 years. Because there are just two settings. There's awake or asleep. Babies don't have the brain pieces yet. The development of the brain has not kicked up yet to allow them to have that lag or that struggle, right? If a baby, a newborn, isn't sleeping or can't fall asleep, there is usually something that's a pretty easy fix. There's gas, there is a diaper, there is an issue with feeding, there is hunger, there are boogers in their nose, there is something going on. They feel unsafe because they aren't spending enough time with mom, or mom is dysregulated, so they're dysregulated. There's something going on that we can address that is not just the baby, right? It's not behavioral. It has nothing to do with behavior. They are just instinct. They are just reflex at that point. So they sleep actually pretty well. Anywhere, anytime, noise, silence, bright lights, dark room, they don't care. They will sleep just about anywhere. Babies are great sleepers in that first 6 to 12 weeks. When we have taken women and spent 9 months on a hunt for how their body is failing them and their babies, and then we put them through the conveyor belt, trauma-inducing standard hospital birth in the United States, and they are now traumatized and disconnected from their own intuition and from their baby. And the baby is now traumatized, and we send them home, and everyone, excuse me, is freaking out and in a complete state of dysregulation. And then we say to moms, just put the baby in the box. It'll calm them down. You'll be able to sleep. And you have to sleep. Everyone has to sleep. We have to sleep. Everybody sleep. Sleep more sleep. Sleep. I haven't really slept much in the last 11 years. I would say I'm doing okay. I don't know that we need as much sleep as we think we do, right? Fine. That's a different conversation. What you're doing is you're taking away from her the one thing that can actually help her. The one thing that is more than just masking symptoms and is actually going to do something to help her heal and recover from the experience. Even if she had an idyllic, perfect, easy birth, easy pregnancy, had midwives loving on her, didn't have someone breathing down her neck every 5 minutes. Like even if she had a perfect, idyllic birth and pregnancy, even then there is some trauma. It is hard work. I've had that birth. I've had the other birth too. But even the birth that was idyllic and perfect and the pregnancy that was smooth as butter, even that one, there was some trauma. There was some recovery that was needed. There was some up-leveling that I had to do. And the way mothers are meant to do this is a process called matrescence, where you go from being the maiden to the mother. The maiden is no longer. She has to be dismantled, and the mother has to be built. It is a period of grieving. It is a period of celebration. It is a period of healing on every possible level. And we have broken her, traumatized her, and then sent her home and told her that the best thing she can do is to separate from her baby because it's for her mental health, because the baby needs to sleep and because she needs to sleep. And what we need to be telling women is that you need to go home or you need to stay home. And you need to have that baby skin to skin on your chest 20 of the 24 hours of the day for the better part of the next month. So whatever you need to do to make that happen, you need to do to make that happen as best you can. Now, not everyone can. We do understand that this process has not ended. The process of separating mothers from their children isn't relegated to the early 1900s or the late 1800s. We're still doing it here in the US at the very least. There is no maternity leave. You have the baby. You can't take a puppy away from its mother for 8 weeks, but we expect that bitch back at work by 3. right? Like we still are in the process of continuing to ingrain and entrench the trauma and keep all of the mothers and babies in a dysregulated state. Because if we as mothers are dysregulated and we can't hear our own intuition and we are being conned into putting our babies away in a box as if that's where babies needed to be, what ends up happening is we hand our power and authority of our children off to the pediatricians. We hand the job that we were given, the sacred job, whether it is God or the flying spaghetti monster in the sky, the innate gift and job and task as those who made the people is to keep the people alive and safe, get them through to adulthood so that they can also continue this pattern and humans continue to exist and can be healthy and live and flourish and do wonderful things. What we have done is taken that instinct, that mama bear, out of the mama. And now this baby is fair game. Because if the mama can't hear her instinct and the mama doesn't know what is normal and what she is supposed to be doing, and the mama is dysregulated and traumatized and broken, well, then everybody else has control over what happens to the baby. We can break that baby too. And if we break them, just like with horses, then you can ride them and guide them and direct them. That might seem a little cray. I used to call them conspiracy theories. And then 2020 happened. I don't know. Anybody else with me? It is not different than what was happening in the late 1800s and early 1900s. This is just one more attempt and effort, successful many times, to keep women separate from their babies. Because if we separate them, we can control them. If there is separation, there's fear, and where there's fear, there's control. So having worked in the medical system for as long as I did, right? 10 years or so, that's a really long time. I know that when the FDA approves something, it's probably something you want to avoid. Like that is just, it's kind of like the going joke. Oh, the CDC said, well, do the opposite. Oh, the FDA approved, well, you might not want to use that thing. It is not without corruption. It is not without obvious, glaring, horrifying mistakes, misjudgments, and missteps. The FDA has killed plenty of people. And I think that our willingness to hand off our power to everybody else who's telling us what we should and shouldn't be doing with ourselves, with our bodies, with our time, with our money is a direct side effect, a direct result of the dismantling of the mother-baby relationship. I just do. So I don't snoo shame parents because parents aren't given adequate informed consent. I want my shame to be directed. I want to shame the professionals. I'm talking to you. All of you professionals, you sleep trainers, you pediatricians, all of the professionals who are still standing up and saying, this is okay. The FDA, CARP, all of you, you're bonkers. You're bonkers and it's not okay. And I will tell you, it is so easy to get sort of, like it's heavy. It's heavy to watch moms and babies go down the path of these paths because they are setting moms up, I believe, for decades of challenges with their children, right? Like if you don't spend the first 3 years responsively, repetitively showing your child with action that you love them and that you are there for them and they're not alone and they're supported because they don't understand your words. If you can't show them with action in those first formative 5 years, I would argue you're probably looking at a teenager who isn't going to communicate with you at all. Why would they? Why would they? You're not going to be the person they come to in an emergency. You're not going to be the person they come to when they're in trouble or when they're scared or when they're uncertain. And that is the most dangerous thing because they're going to go to friends. They're going to go to TikTok. They're going to go to sources that do not have their best interest in mind. You're setting them up for learned helplessness, and we are setting them up for depression and anxiety and sadness. And unfortunately, as a teenager who lived that reality, and this is not a person who situation. There is a narrative about teenagers being difficult, and that narrative about teenagers being difficult comes from the boomers. And the boomers were the ones who were most likely to not breastfeed, to be back at work quickly, to be sleep training their babies, because that is what was pushed. It was pushed so hard. Women were given literal off-label drugs to stop their milk production at birth. Like, what planet? It wasn't women who were saying this makes sense. It was the dudes, the old white doctor dudes, mansplaining motherhood to mothers. It's not okay. And they're still doing it, right? Takeaway from today. If you have used a Snoo, you cannot feel bad. We all do the best we can with what we've got. If you are currently using a Snoo, I might encourage you to consider not using it, right? If not using it is not an option, then I would highly recommend that you work with a lactation consultant, you work with an occupational therapist and maybe a pediatric physical therapist, chiropractor. Make sure that we are helping this baby unwind. Time responsiveness. Make sure that we are not just letting them lay in that box in a shutdown state for hours and hours and hours on end. And it's okay. It's okay. We all do what we can. We all do what's best for ourselves and our families. And just remembering that we are still mammals and our babies are still mammals. And they're the mammaliest of our species mammals because they are just instinct. They are just survival, right? And the reactions, the reflexes that we have as mothers, even if we can talk ourselves out of it, we probably shouldn't. I really just don't feel like that is the right thing for my kid. But, I guess it makes sense and I probably shouldn't argue. Don't do that. You don't need to know why. If it doesn't feel right, it's not right. And the way you're going to tap into that is when your baby is born, regardless of what that pregnancy and birth was like for you, is spending 20 of the 24 hours a day for at least the first month, if you can, with your baby on your body. Yes, lie down, heal, rest, but that can also mean wearing your baby. That can mean safely sleeping with your baby. It will change your life. You will sleep. We sleep great. We mamas who bed share and breastfeed sleep really, I don't even want to admit how well we sleep. And it is without fail that every mother for whom I am able to support in working themselves up to that, every single one looks at me and goes, I can't believe how well I sleep. I can't believe how easy this is. It's supposed to be. So today, in the name of the divine feminine, we take back our power, tell the FDA to shove it, tell Harvey Karp that he needs to retire. He does not need to tell me how to be a mother. Okay. And we can go ahead and move forward, learning our own intuition, starting to hear our own intuition, and respecting and trusting that our babies are not there to manipulate us. They're just there to tell us what they need. And if they ask you for something, it's because they need it. There are no differences between needs and wants for at least the first few years of life, even if it seems wacky. And we can just rest in that. So please, if you feel uncomfortable with the idea of allowing a century's worth of nonsense into your postpartum space, feel free to tell it to take a long walk off a short pier and reach out to someone, to another wise woman, to some other wise women. Find out how the rest of us make this happen. So I'm going to leave a couple of links to interesting places in the show notes. So feel free to have a check on those. And I would love to hear your thoughts. So if you're watching this on YouTube and you want to drop a thought or a criticism or a question or a concern in the comment section, if you want to give me tell us your experience with the Snoo, with bed sharing, with breastfeeding, how you felt like you were or were not supported by your medical team in that fucking sacred fourth trimester. Please, let's start the conversation. I think this is where we get to really move into some new cool things. And this is how we get to be subversive, is by acknowledging that maternal instinct is not a farce that was created by the patriarchy to keep us at home tied to the tables. If that were the case, we would still be home tied to the tables, right? the overarching 1% elite gods of, managing the world. This would not have happened. Women would not have left the home in droves like this if it didn't benefit someone's bottom line. So pretending that we are anything more than mammals and energetic beings is absurd. We absolutely have maternal instinct, and it does not make you weak, and it does not make you not good, and it does not make you less desirable or not a feminist. It's just what it is. And so we can acknowledge that and honor that and respect the fact that as women during this matrescence period, we need and deserve additional resources, protection, support. All of that is important. Our brains change. The prefrontal cortex slows down. Our amygdalas fire up after we've had a baby. We are not in a critical left brain thinking place. We are in a feeling place, right? So asking for more support around that is not crazy. It makes total sense. It's like asking for more support after you have major surgery, which many women do as they enter matrescence. This is leveling up, y'all. Let's own it. And Carp, I take your Snoo and